Well, earlier this morning, the Russian military slamming targets in Kharkiv, air raid sirens across Kiev. This comes as Russian President Putin has declared that NATO is officially at war with Russia, something we've been saying for years on this show. Not sure exactly why Putin hasn't wanted to admit it until today, but it's been pretty obvious to all of us that have been watching that this is a NATO proxy war against Russia. Meanwhile, President Trump flying to the EU, and as he was leaving, he told reporters that Zelensky needs to do a deal with Russia right now. And he said he'll have to sit in between Putin and Zelensky because they hate each other. Watch.
Those are two people, Zelensky and Putin, that hate each other. And it looks like I have to sit in the room with them because they can't sit in the room together. There's great hatred there. But no, that meeting accomplished a lot.
And this morning in Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu said that Israel's enemies are America's enemies and that Qatar and China are preparing for an attack on Israel. So I'm sure we need to probably do what Netanyahu tells us to do, like we always do, and go to war with both of them.
Great.
Right now, listen.
And we will have to do several things to break loose from this siege that is organized by a few states. One is China, and the other is Qatar. And they are organizing an attack on Israel, legitimacy.
Okay. Colonel Douglas McGregor.
We made some new enemies, Colonel.
Yeah.
Here
Not
we go.
surprising. It's China and Qatar now. We need to take care of them, but we'll get to that in a second. Colonel, great to see you.
Hey, good to see you both.
All right. What do you make of, first, let's talk about Russia here. President Putin saying that NATO is at war with Russia. President Trump flying there now. I don't know if what sort of peace agreement he's hoping to put in place, if anything, at this point, on his trip to the EU. I don't know if Zelensky's going to show up there. They're going to have a meeting. But we were supposed to have peace. We were told within 24 hours of President Trump taking office. This is descending now into the fall, going to get cold, freezing temperatures now on the battlefield. Where do you think things stand now?
Well, I think things are pretty much what they've been for several months now. The war is lost. The Ukrainians have been largely annihilated. The sad part is that President Trump doesn't seem to be aware of that. He continues to repeat these utterly fictitious numbers and assessments that I guess he gets from the intelligence community, which is part of the problem. I don't know, but I mean, the notion that I think he made a comment yesterday, well, 8,000 men died in the last month. And of course, most of them were Russian, but still it's bad. The Russians have been taking losses in single and double digits now for several months. The Ukrainians are losing thousands of people every week. This is just a slaughter. And I don't know why President Trump doesn't recognize that and simply state the facts. The facts are Ukrainians have lost this war. Now, he can continue to rely on General Kellogg for fictional numbers, which is what he appears to be doing. But even worse, he can conclude that Russia is losing, according to General Kellogg, because the Russians haven't marched into Kiev. The Russians haven't crossed in the Upper River yet. It's a rather bizarre logic. There's never been any understanding in the West of certain things. Number one, President Trump has never recognized Russia's legitimate security interests in eastern Ukraine. He doesn't seem to understand that once we staged the coup in 2014, the war in Ukraine against Russians began almost immediately. And that war continued to rage for years until finally the Russians said enough is enough and intervened in eastern Ukraine. If you can't agree on the truth of what is actually going on and what has happened, how can you reach an agreement? In other words, if you come into this discussion with two separate sets of facts, what are you going to get? And the answer is nowhere. So I don't see President Trump coming out with anything. The other thing is that we're not in a very strong position because, as you pointed out, Clayton and Natalie earlier, we have led this war against Russia. All you have to do is go back to Biden. And now President Trump sounds just like Biden. Biden said in March, we've got to break Russia. It's not enough to harm Russia. We have to break it, destroy its economy. We've got to rubble the ruble, remember? And then ultimately, we've got to get rid of Putin. Good Lord. What more do you want? When is Trump going to step forward and say, listen, I disavow all that nonsense. I'm not interested in doing any of that. If he really wants an end to the war, he has to distance himself from all of that nonsense. He hasn't done it. That's a huge problem, Clayton.
Yeah.
And I continue to see what Zelensky does. It reminds me of a formerly popular music artist that just tours county fairs, because all he does is go on his Twitter and say, I met with this world leader. They love us. They support us. I met with this world leader. We exchange pleasantries. They love us. What the hell is he doing? He's not operating in reality. So the Ukrainians not only have no plan on the battlefield, they have no leadership. So anyone who wants to say they support Ukraine should absolutely support an end to this clown regime.
Well, the clown that you're talking about has an estimated $1.1 billion in various bank accounts that he has stolen from all of the aid and assistance that we and our European allies have provided. And I know he's prepared to retire to either his $15 million estate somewhere south of Naples, Florida, or his massive chateau and vineyard in Italy. And he's got a private plane that's fueled and ready to go at moment's notice. I mean, the man is a criminal. That's the only way to look at it. He makes any organized crime boss look like an amateur. And the man continues to run around high on cocaine or whatever else it is that he's using at any given point in time and make outrageous statements. I don't know why President Trump puts up with it. Doesn't make any sense. He ought to just dismiss this man out of hand. And again, one wonders who is in charge. Who is the president of the United States? It's not just look what's happening with regard to our unconditional support for anything that President Netanyahu wants. At the same time, this is the president of the United States. We're the principal player that has been pushing this terribly stupid and counterproductive war in Ukraine, and he can't stop it by simply saying, my friend Zelensky, you're out of a job. We no longer recognize you as legitimate. We're cutting you off. Get out. Why bother turning it into say, well, you got to make a deal? What? The hell with the deal? The deal is you've lost. Get out.
Yeah, know when to fold them, as Kenny Rogers would say. Well, the real president of the United States is once again set to fly to Washington, D.C. on September 29th. We just learned that President Trump has invited the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for the fourth visit on September 29th to Washington, D.C. Of course, Netanyahu basically runs the United States, as anyone with a brain knows. You saw the soundbite, of course, this morning with Netanyahu talking about his enemies, China, Qatar, are now enemies. And he says, our enemies are, of course, the United States' enemies. So I imagine we're planning an attack, of course, on Iran. We're getting ready for probably another attack on Qatar and now China. What do you make of those statements today from Netanyahu?
Well, first, remember, all small states are permanently in the business of dragging large states into wars on their behalf. In other words, any small state that wants to survive, like Israel, and starts a war that it cannot possibly win without tremendous support from us, has a permanent interest in dragging us in. Now he's trying to tie us to the phony threat of an imminent Chinese invasion of Taiwan, which is not imminent and not likely unless we're stupid enough to put missiles and rockets on Taiwan that can reach the mainland. We've already got batteries of missiles sitting in the northern Philippines that can reach the Chinese mainland. Nobody talks about that. The Chinese are upset about it and don't understand it, but at the same time, they're not willing to invade the Philippines to get rid of it. But the point is that, China's a current boogeyman, so tie your future to the boogeyman and say, now we're all in this together. No, we're not. We're not in anything at all with Israel. Israel is controlling us for one simple reason. He's bought and paid for the United States Congress and the White House. And there's an old saying, there's nothing more reliable than a man you can buy for cold, hard cash. And it looks like that's what he's got. And the audience that he's talking to, as I understand it, consists of large numbers of members of Congress. And I'm sure they've been handed cue cards for the 29th visit so that they all know when to stand up and give a standing ovation. He owns it. Now, how does he own it? Well, we know who the billionaires are in the United States, many of whom have dual citizenship, who have poured hundreds of millions of dollars into President Trump's campaign to get him into the White House and to buy up support for Israel on the Hill. It's worked. They're in control. The question is, how long will the American people put up with this? When do we hit the streets the way people have hit the streets in London? I don't know.
We want to introduce you to our friends over at Venice.ai, because if you want to use AI, but you're nervous about the technology, of course, you're not alone. Sam Altman recently announced that ChatGPT can reference all of your past conversations. Do you feel comfortable knowing an AI platform has access to all of your thoughts, dreams, sensitive questions, business ideas? What are they doing with it? He said they will get to know your life. Right now, there's a former director of the NSA sitting on the board. Edward Snowden called this a willful, calculated betrayal of the rights of every person on Earth. That's why we think that Venice.ai is a great alternative. It uses open source AI models, in fact, to deliver text, code, and image generation to your browser, but there's no downloads, no installation of anything, and it doesn't spy on you or censor the AI. Messages are encrypted, and your conversation history is only stored on your browser. AI, of course, can be extremely valuable, but we shouldn't give up our privacy to use it. They have a Venice Pro plan that unlocks the full platform, features including PDF uploads for summaries or insights, the ability to turn off safe mode for unhindered image generation, the ability to change how Venice interacts with you by modifying symptom prompts, limitless text, high image limits. So try it for yourself. Head on over to venice.ai/redacted. See what it can do for you and how it feels to use a truly private AI source. So one more time, that's venice.ai, Venice, VENICE.ai/redacted.
So at some point, this has to break. I mean, among young people, obviously, and I think this is where you were seeing the cracks, certainly with Charlie Kirk, he was hearing overwhelmingly across universities as he would speak to college students, like, why are members of Congress so bought and paid for by a foreign lobby? It doesn't make any sense. So we're starting to see this big fracture.
They also argued they're not foreign, remember? Because they say most of the money comes from within the United States. Well, that may be true. And these people may be dual citizens. That's another problem. Why we have any dual citizens serving in any federal post of any kind is a mystery to me. Why would you want to tolerate someone like that who has dual loyalties? You know, one of the reasons we passed the law in the Constitution that said that you had to be born in the United States was because people were very fearful that someone who was not born in the United States, that was backed by a foreign power, could ultimately get to the White House. They didn't want that to happen. They were very afraid of it in 1787 and 1789. Well, to some extent, I think you can make the argument it's practically happened. Someone in the White House is now so Israel first in his orientation that America is not just last, it's not even up for consideration on most occasions.
Someone in our chat room just said midterm elections are the closest chance we have to diminish Israel's influence on U.S. government.
But how?
Prepare accordingly.
Like, are we going to vote Democrat then? I've been thinking about this acutely because I saw someone say, I'm going to be a single issue voter now is, did you touch that wall? And if you touch that wall, you don't get my vote. Then we're voting Democrat? I can't do that. Then what?
I don't know. There's plenty of people on the right that are fed up with this. So I don't know. You can vote independent. I don't know.
Well, my favorite wall, of course, is the wall around the Alamo in San Antonio. And that's where I would bring everybody on a routine basis and say, this is the altar of our faith as Americans. This is where we won a tremendous victory at great cost to Americans and established the United States so that it runs basically from the Atlantic to the Pacific. One nation with one law and one language, something that practically nobody else has ever had. That's where we ought to be praying, right there at that particular wall. But I don't know that I'm going to be able to recruit very many billionaires to bring all the congressmen there, or to ensure that all of the congressmen, Democrats and Republicans, get their stipend from the Israel lobby on a routine basis if they go and pray at the wall around the Alamo.
Right.
Yeah.
Write a little note, have Netanyahu have you wear a yarmulke and pay your pilgrimage, costs. I mean, we saw Marco Rubio doing that yesterday. I mean, America's Secretary of State, and now Netanyahu is coming back to the United States for a fourth time. It's just
Qatar is a problem because Qatar has strongly supported the Turks. I mean, if you take Qatar out of the equation, Mr. Erdogan and Turkey and his economy are in a lot of trouble. I think that's one of the reasons that Mr. Netanyahu mentioned Qatar specifically, because in the last few months, it's become increasingly clear to the Turkish people, as well as to Mr. Erdogan at the top, that Israel is a force that they're going to have to fight. And I think that's a nightmare for the Israelis, because the Turks have the military power to truly threaten Israel. And so taking a swipe at Qatar at this point makes a lot of sense from his standpoint if you're trying to bring the United States into the fight. Now, the Trump family, along with some of the people in his White House, his billionaire contemporaries, have a lot of money invested in Qatar. So I don't know that he's cleared that with them yet, because that could cost the president and some of his friends a lot of money. We'll see. The China card, again, it's the phony boogeyman. And I doubt very seriously that members of the Israeli Defense Force are scanning the skies for the arrival of all those airplanes carrying hundreds of thousands of Chinese paratroopers. So, again, all of this is the same philosophy, though. Let's bring in the United States and drag it into the region. It appeals to egos. It appeals to the globalist, military hegemonists, the people that want to rule the world. And of course, you and I know, everybody with any common sense knows, you can't rule the world with military power. It's prohibitively expensive. It can't be done. And we're losing. We're losing in a big way commercially across the world. We're not trading. We're so busy beating people over the head with tariffs. We're poisoning our own interests. India is a great example. India and we have had great relations for many, many years. And they cooperate with us more than any other state militarily, specifically in the Indian Ocean, where effectively they've proved to be a very useful ally in suppressing piracy and illegal drugs and you name it. And they've worked with us against Islamist terrorism, obviously, because it's a permanent threat to them. But we turned around and we want to punish India because it buys oil and gas from Russia. Well, what we don't seem to understand is something that Washington understood only too well. He said, no state in the world can be expected to move beyond the limits of its own interests. India wants to be friends with us, wants to do business with us, but India is not going to turn on Russia, with whom they've had very close relations for the last 80 years, or certainly since they became independent, and suddenly ruin their commercial relationship with Russia. They're not going to turn on them for any reason. And this business with China, the potential for a war with China, as far as India is concerned, has always been there. But the two sides are too rational and too reasonable to go to war. For what? How do they benefit from a war? So the notion of urging them to be hostile to China, hostile to Russia, hostile to Iran, hostile to anybody that we don't like is ridiculous. It's not working. This whole tariff business is an absolute dud. We need to get out of it.
Colonel Douglas Macgregor, always great to see you. He's penned a new piece that I think you all should read if you get a chance to read it, about how the power in the world is moving from west to east. Where can people read your latest post, by the way?
Well, it's on X. So if you look for me on X, you'll find it. It's about 1,000 words. And I think people will find it very useful because the theme is this. Look, we went through 1492 in the West. When we discovered the New World, it was not just a function of Columbus finding his way to the Indies. It was also a tremendous change in trade. Suddenly, tons of gold and spices and other valuable things came pouring into the coffers of Portugal and Spain, and eventually to France and Great Britain. It changed the trade relationships. It effectively killed this thing called the Silk Road. And as a result, the whole Islamic world that had grown rich off of this trade for hundreds of years started to decline and eventually plunged into ruin and poverty. Well, what's happening to us right now is something similar. The world is moving away from us. The world is moving to where the manufacturing base is, to where they're getting a positive reception. And of course, supply chains follow habits. They're building habits now of doing business with India, with China, with Japan. And the supply chains need stability and predictability. We're giving them chaos and disorder and war. Those times are at an end. War is something that should be exception, not the rule now. It's the wrong instrument. We need to tend to our own affairs here at home. We used to be on top from the standpoint of manufacturing, innovation, and invention. We can get there again, but not on the path we're on right now.
Well, thank you for that. We really appreciate it. It's always good to see you.
Thank you, Colonel.
Yeah.
All righty. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You too.
Thank you, Colonel. Great to see you.